Your Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. On today's episode, I'll discuss Artyom Levshunov's NHL debut, as well as the latest news we have on Jonathan Toews' comeback, before I wrap things up in segment 3 with some of the latest updates on the Blackhawks OHL Prospects. Hope everyone's Tuesday is off to a wonderful start. I know mine is in particular because it's my birthday here today, and as a birthday wish, I would love if you all could go and hit that like button, comment down below, and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube, all of which is 100% free, will not cost you anything, and really helps me out in a massive way as I'm now on the climb to 3,000 subscribers. But happy Tuesday again, everyone. Thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. To open things up on the show here today, the Arty Party has arrived in Chicago. Some surprising news dropping on Monday morning as I was in the midst of traveling back from Orlando. As you all can tell who's watching, for those of you who are watching on the YouTube side of things, I'm back in my normal studio, rocking the Blackhawks hat. Feels good to be back at home and settled here to kick off this week. Was traveling yesterday, so that's why this episode is dropping a little bit later on Tuesday for the first show of the week. But yeah, surprising news coming out on Monday morning as the 2024 second overall pick in Artyom Levshunov was recalled from the Rockford Ice Hogs. And now we had seen Levshunov called up a little bit earlier in the season, right around mid-January, I believe it was, when the Ice Hogs were actually in the midst of the AHL All-Star break, and with them having a week or so in between games, the Hawks front office decided to recall Levshunov, not to make his NHL debut, though, but just to get him some practice reps with the big boys in the NHL squad. And quite honestly, ever since then, Artyom Levshunov had been playing really solid for the Ice Hogs. And although there are a lot of people seeing what Ivan Demidov is currently doing over in the KHL and wishing he was the selection that the Blackhawks have made at second overall, but that shouldn't diminish what Artyom Levshunov has done as a 19-year-old in his first pro season, especially with all the quick leaps he's been forced to make over the last 2.5 years since coming over from Belarus, immediately jumping into the USHL, not having a huge training camp before his freshman season with Michigan State, which went phenomenally. Then he signs his entry-level deal with the Blackhawks, quickly makes the leap to pro hockey. So it's been a fast transition for Levshunov over these last couple of years. But I've thought he's done a really solid job with the Ice Hogs, all things considered, especially with, kind of the troubles the Ice Hogs have been battling through this year, which I've talked about time and time again here on the show. I've been really pleased, all things considered, with how Artyom Levshunov's first professional campaign has gone thus far. But quite honestly, Blackhawks fans, I was pretty shocked that the Hawks called him up this early with, still 18, 19 games left in the regular season. And some of you may remember actually one of my bold predictions that I gave out at the beginning of the season. I touched on these during the Four Nations face-off, just so that could be a little bit of a reminder as to the bold predictions I gave out. One of them, though, was that Artyom Levshunov wouldn't make his NHL debut until March or April. And I also said I wouldn't be surprised to see Levshunov stick with the Rockford Ice Hogs for the entirety of the season. And honestly, I wouldn't have minded had the Hawks kept him down in Rockford, considering, like I mentioned, just the quick turnarounds he's already handled. I think just being in Rockford allows him in a spot to be stable, and then you don't really have some of the worries about him making his NHL debut at 19 years old, maybe being a little bit too in over his head. And for his NHL debut to come against the Colorado Avalanche like it did last night, which I'll get into here in just a second, I didn't think that was necessarily the best spot for Levshunov to necessarily get his feet wet and make his NHL debut, but wound up being the case. And I was pleasantly surprised with how Levshunov handled himself in his first NHL action, going up against a real strong offensive bunch that plays with a ton of speed in the Colorado Avalanche. And it wasn't like, Anders Sorensen and this coaching staff just kind of eased him into it. No, Levshunov was forced to play over 20 minutes last night in his NHL debut because, sadly, the Blackhawks lost Alec Martinez due to injury. So there was tons of youth on the back end for Chicago. And not only Levshunov, but I thought that 5-man group as a whole held it down pretty well. Close contested game through the opening 40 minutes, nothing. But for Levshunov in particular, man, I thought it was a splendid debut. And I think there was only really one defensive sequence where he got himself in trouble, but made the right simplified plays in the defensive zone, used his size when necessary. But the stuff that I saw out of him on the power play and a couple of strong shifts in the offensive zone, that's really what impressed me the most. How well he handled himself, kind of quarterbacking the Blackhawks man advantage in his first NHL game, again, at only 19 years old. I thought he was really, really solid. I loved his aggressiveness and how often he was shooting the puck. Had numerous opportunities to pick up his first NHL point. Had a chance to score his first NHL goal as well. Wound up tallying 3 shots on goal. Had 6 shot attempts and had 2 block shots in his own zone as well, with 20 minutes and 55 seconds of time on ice. Really good stuff from Artyom Levshunov. Those concerns that I had about him making his debut in such a tough spot in Colorado, like, he handled all of that tremendously well. So hopefully that's a good boost of confidence for Levshunov for however long he's going to be up with the Blackhawks. I figure if he continues to play like this, there's no reason to not have him up at the NHL level for the rest of the season. I'm sure there was kind of a conversation from the Blackhawks front office and the coaching staff with Levshunov about the expectations, or at least that's what I'd hope. And I feel like all good organizations would have those type of discussions with their prospects, especially considering how many prospects, I know not many as high end as Levshunov as a former 2nd overall pick, but the sheer number of prospects that the Blackhawks have had jumping onto the scene and making their NHL debuts, and maybe not necessarily sticking around for too long, and just kind of having those conversations and letting them know, hey, even if you have some hiccups, there's always going to be bumps in the road for young players getting their feet wet at this level. I hope the Blackhawks were having those conversations with Levshunov. And, obviously in hindsight, everything's 2020. It went well last night, but had it not gone well for Levshunov in his debut, I really hope the Blackhawks laid out a good plan for him and had him in a comfortable place, knowing that there wasn't too much pressure on his shoulders to go play well right here, right now. Just an opportunity for him to kind of get a grasp of what this level looks like and the speed and how you have to play in order to have success. I think it is a good decision to give Levshunov his debut, even though I did have some concerns beforehand. Hopefully he keeps this up, and like I said, gives him some good confidence moving forward when the Blackhawks return to action on Thursday night in San Jose. The Hawks, sadly, were not able to extend their 5-game point streak that they opened the month of March with, as they fell 3-0 to the Avalanche last night, but it wasn't due to a lack of effort or a poor performance whatsoever. They continue to play really strong against the Colorado Avalanche for whatever reason. They actually only got outshot 21-20. The issue for the Hawks was that Scott Wedgwood simply was standing on his head and wasn't going to allow a puck to get across the goal line. I mean, he made probably 4 or 5 A-plus stops, and it was actually the first time all season long, believe it or not, that the Blackhawks had been shut out. Them and the Dallas Stars prior to last night were the only 2 teams left in the NHL without being shut out on the season. Sometimes you just got to tip your hat to the other team's goaltender for an incredible performance, but Spencer Knight was really solid in goal for the Blackhawks once again. And as a group, I think the Hawks just continue to play more confident hockey and much better full unit performances, even though the final outcome didn't go their way. They had their 5-game point streak snapped, like I mentioned, but I think it's a sign of good things to come at the conclusion of the season, which as a fan is so nice to see this team just playing much better. Funny enough, ever since they traded Seth Jones to the Florida Panthers, they've been on a nice run here. And I thought it was funny to hear Nick Foligno, the captain's post-game comments after this one, saying that, when you get rid of a distraction, he didn't necessarily label or call out Seth there, but we all know what he was talking about. He said when you get rid of some of those distractions, it just allows for everyone to get on the same page. Feels like that's what's going on with this young group right now. I love to see it. All the young kids on the scene. It's what the end of the season should be about. Probably should have been more about this earlier in the season, if I'm being honest. But there are my full thoughts I have from Artyom Levshunov making a pretty sound NHL debut despite the Blackhawks falling 3-0 to the Colorado Avalanche. Coming up in just a moment, Blackhawks fans, don't go anywhere because I'll get into the latest updates we have on Jonathan Toews and his NHL comeback. Real quick, though, I do got to talk to you all about Wonderful Pistachios. Are you looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Well, then go and crack into a great source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts out there, as each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily nutritional value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and are better for you than unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. So whether you're running between meetings or dropping off the kids at school or at a sporting event, Wonderful Pistachios are the snack that works as hard as you do. So go and get snackin and get crackin with the snack that packs a protein punch right now by checking out wonderfulpistachios.com. Again, that's wonderfulpistachios.com to check it out today and learn more. Segment 2, I spoke probably a month ago or so, Blackhawks fans, on some of the latest whispers we were getting in the hockey world on Jonathan Toews potentially making an NHL comeback, some of the posts that he made on Instagram, and I believe it was GQ. I can't remember exactly. I apologize who dropped the article, and it was a personalized, like, one-on-one sit-down with Jonathan Toews of him kind of talking about some of the retreats he's been on and the forms of medicine he's been using to help help him heal from the chronic immune response syndrome illness that he was diagnosed with a handful of years ago. But it sure sounds like Jonathan Toews making an NHL comeback. It was a rumor about a month ago. Sure sounds like it's past that stage, as a new article from Mark Lazarus of The Athletic also dropped on Monday with some real intriguing quotes from the former Blackhawks captain and 3-time Stanley Cup champion. Here's what Jonathan Toews had to say in his interview with Mark Lazarus. Quote, "I'm not satisfied the way things ended in Chicago. It's not about proving anything. It's just that there's something left in the tank, and I want to explore that. I want to go have fun, have a blast, play with passion, but at the same time, I still have some high-level hockey left. I want to be able to step away from the game having said that I've given it my all, and I still think there's something left to give." And it's funny, I've been talking about this topic, once every couple of months throughout the course of the last few years, and the thing that I always came back to is the fire that Jonathan Toews has inside his belly. It's what made him so great and had him lead the Chicago Blackhawks to all the success they had as their captain, him winning on the international scene, what he did in college hockey with North Dakota. It's because of the fire and the competitive spirit that Jonathan Toews has inside him. You can't necessarily put a finger on it. You can't put a grade on it, but make no mistake about it, he's got it. And because of that fire and that fuel and that passion, I always thought Jonathan Toews was going to have a hard time leaving the game the way he did. Now, the problem was he never could really trust his body, and it was a day-to-day basis, and depending on how he would feel the next day is really ultimately how he would make his decisions. And it just didn't seem like in his final years with the Blackhawks, he was all that confident in his abilities. He knew it was absolutely wearing on him. We saw him be forced to step away even after returning. His game wasn't all that consistent as it was throughout those years when he was leading the team to greatness. And I'm sure that, just knowing the guy that Jonathan Toews is, I'm sure that rubbed him the wrong way. And if there was any glimpse possible of him making a comeback, I knew he was going to pursue it because of that passion. And to hear Jonathan Toews talk about how well he's feeling, and also Blackhawks fans, for those of you who don't know, he's been skating in Arizona over the last couple of weeks, and there were actually some cool pictures shared on social media here today from Daniel Carcillo, former Blackhawk, and a couple of other people who were skating with Jonathan Toews, and to see him smiling, skating around with a ton of kids. And he even said so himself in this interview, like when he was playing with Chicago those last few years, he was absolutely drained, and it took everything out of him, and he wasn't able to play with that passion and that energy. And even in just like a practice skate type of setting with some kids down there in Arizona, to see the smiles that Jonathan Toews has on his face, and even going back to those Instagram posts that I talked about of him like surfing and going on these missions in different parts of the world to help heal his body, just to see him smile and like enjoy life again, even though he's still struggling. Him actually enjoying the things that he's doing and living his life, I think that's the best thing in the world. And because he has that clear mind and that clear headspace, and his body is finally agreeing with him, and he feels confident in his body moving forward, I'm not surprised to see him really trying to suit it up for next season, as he's going to turn 37 years old in April, which is just absolutely crazy to say. Hasn't played since the 2022-2023 season, with the Blackhawks, where he tallied 31 points, 15 goals, and 16 assists in 53 games. Has been out for the last 2 years, as I mentioned, from chronic inflammatory response syndrome and also some side effects from post-COVID. According to this article, Toews has not yet been in contact with any NHL clubs, and he revealed he didn't really have any true aspirations of signing with the team prior to Friday's NHL trade deadline that would make him eligible to suit up in the Stanley Cup playoffs during the spring. But it sure seems like Toews is giving it his all, gearing up to make a return to the NHL next season. It's going to be fascinating to see where Jonathan Toews is going to wind up, as he even joked in this article with Lazarus that he's never been an unrestricted free agent in his entire career. So he's not necessarily sure how it works. Some teams that have been rumored for Toews really ever since the get-go, the Boston Bruins. I don't know if that's going to be the case anymore, considering the direction they're heading in. I think the Colorado Avalanche have made a lot of sense. The Winnipeg Jets, his hometown team, makes a lot of sense. The Edmonton Oilers, just considering, Stan Bowman and the Chicago ties that they have there, I don't think the Edmonton Oilers would be anything crazy. Those are probably the teams that I'm throwing out there, but do not expect it to be the Chicago Blackhawks. And I know that's a tough pill to swallow for a lot of you Hawks fans out there, but Jonathan Toews even recognizes and is okay with the Blackhawks. I'm sure there's part of him deep down that is a little upset that he didn't play his entire career from start to finish with the Blackhawks, and Kyle Davidson didn't necessarily make it seem like the organization was wanting to keep him on. I think that had to have rubbed him and Patrick Kane the wrong way in some sense. But at the end of the day, Jonathan Toews' interest returning to the game of hockey as a 37-year-old does not whatsoever match up with the Chicago Blackhawks, not only because it would cast a shadow on Connor Bedard and it would just kind of make the circus even crazier for the Hawks moving forward. But this Blackhawks team is still years away from contending. And if Jonathan Toews is coming back with a ticking clock as he's 37 years old, he wants to be contending. So the goals don't necessarily align whatsoever. But Toews did say, quote, "I honestly do think that chapter is closed," talking about the Blackhawks. "I respect what Kyle and the organization are doing. They decided a few years ago to move in a different direction, and I'm all for that. I don't think that's a fit for me anymore." So as tough as it will be to see Jonathan Toews, like Patrick Kane, wearing the Detroit Red Wings sweater, I don't think Jonathan Toews is going to be doing anything that crazy. But it will be weird regardless, whether it's Boston, Colorado, Winnipeg, or maybe a team that I'm not necessarily thinking of right here, right now. It will be weird to see him suit up in another jersey, but at the end of the day, Jonathan Toews being healthy enough to return to NHL action should put a smile on all of our faces like it's putting a smile on his. Makes me a very, very happy man. There is all I have on the latest updates on Jonathan Toews' potential NHL comeback. Coming up in just a moment, Blackhawks fans, before I close out today's episode, do want to talk about a couple of Blackhawks OHL prospects, in particular, Nick Lardis hitting 70 goals in a single season. Real quick, though, Blackhawks fans, I got to talk to you all about Factor. Are you looking for a way to optimize your nutrition this year? Well, Factor makes eating well easy with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. They have 40 options across 8 dietary preferences every week so that you can customize your meals to fit your lifestyle. Whether it's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto, Factor has got you covered. Plus, they even offer wholesome smoothies, breakfasts, and grab-and-go snacks to help keep you fueled all day long. And I personally love how Factor takes the stress out of my meal planning. The convenience is absolutely unbeatable with no prep, no mess, and just great food in minutes. So go and eat smart with Factor now by getting started at factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50 off and use the code LockedOnNHL50 off in all caps to get 50% off your first meal plus free shipping. I know it's a little bit of a mouthful, Blackhawks fans, but this deal is absolutely worth it. That's code LOCKEDONNHL 50 off at factormeals.com. LOCKEDONNHL 50 off in all caps at factormeals.com/LOCKEDONNHL 50 off to get 50% plus free shipping on your first box with Factor. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Just want to say thank you, everyone, for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen. For your second listen, make sure to go and check out the Locked On NHL podcast, bringing you daily league-wide stories that matter with the local coverage you love from Locked On. Go and find Locked On NHL right now on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. Segment 3, the last Blackhawks prospect update that I got into last week was covering the NCAA prospects. I will be getting into that on tomorrow's show as we got a slew of noteworthy updates to get into as we're in the month of March, conference tournaments underway, getting towards the most noteworthy part of the season for NCAA hockey. But today, I wanted to get into some updates on the Blackhawks OHL prospects, starting off with, of course, 2023 third-round pick. Still can't believe this kid went 67th overall. Nick Lardis, who officially became the 8th player in OHL history to record 70 goals after another fabulous weekend. First player since John Tavares in 2007-2008 to have 70 tucks in a single season. How about it, Nick Lardis, leading the entire CHL in goals, second in the O in points, behind a guy who could be a potential teammate of his moving forward in Michael Misa. But what a phenomenal season it's been for Nick Lardis. Now has 113 points, 70 goals, and 43 assists in just 61 games. And there's 5 games left in the season for the Brantford Bulldogs, Blackhawks fans. And Lardis is currently 1 goal back of Eric Lindros for 6th all-time, 2 goals back of John Tavares for 5th all-time. The real interesting one, because I do think Nick Lardis, with the way the Brantford Bulldogs are going to be feeding him over these next few games, everyone's aware of this situation. And not only that, I mean, Nick Lardis, opposing teams have had him circled all season long in their dressing room, and they just have not found a way to stop him. I think he's going to be getting 2 goals in these final 5 games. The real interesting one is, can he make a charge for Steve Gatsos, whose 4th all-time in the OHL single-season goals record was 78. Nick Lardis is 8 goals back of 4th all-time in OHL history with 5 games left to play. Can he score 8 goals over the next 5 games? It's going to be fascinating to watch, but what a season. Regardless if he gets that number, getting in this rarefied air of 70 goals in a single season is so unbelievable. I don't know necessarily, Blackhawks fans, if this type of season, this might sound wrong, but I don't know if this type of season really changes how I've thought about Nick Lardis, because I knew he was going to be a 50 goal scorer in the O this year. I knew he would probably score 60. Yeah, I didn't know necessarily he was going to be at this level in terms of his sniping ability. I don't know necessarily if this changes my mind on him, because the question still looms the same. Can he do the same things he's doing right here, right now against grown men? I don't know if he's going to make a meteoric rise in my Blackhawks prospect rankings when I get into it again at the end of the 2024-25 campaign, but undoubtedly the upside that this kid has risen during that stretch. Nick Lardis, I don't know exactly where he's going to fit in. Maybe he'll be 5th or 6th or something, but he definitely has the upside to be number 2 or number 3 in a year's time. Or when we look back at this Blackhawks prospect pool, could have said Nick Lardis could have been at number 2. I admit he has that type of unique skill set. I don't really know where I was going with that, Blackhawks fans, but regardless, 78 tucks would be epic out of Nick Lardis. 5 games to go. Can he get 8 goals or more? Next, I wanted to get to Marek Vanacker, because while Nick Lardis has gotten the lion's share of attention during the Brantford Bulldogs games this season, Marek Vanacker has been on a beautiful stretch since returning from injury over the last month or two, nearly up to a point per game on the season with 37 points now, 20 goals and 17 assists in 40 games. And he had a nice 5-point game on Saturday night to help lead Brantford to victory. Next Blackhawks OHL prospect, I wanted to talk about is Alex Ferrand, former 4th-round pick, the 99th overall selection in 2023. Career season for him in the OHL, his final campaign with the Sudbury Wolves. He's now up to 56 points, 17 goals, and 39 assists in 59 games, and is just 2 points shy of a new career best in goals for the Wolves as well. Then we go to Martin Misiak for the Erie Otters. He's up to 50 points now. He had a real strong game over the weekend where he was named Erie's player of the game. He's got 20 goals and 30 assists in 53 games. And the uptick in playmaking is something I've talked about time and time again whenever I mention Martin Misiak. I don't ever think he's going to be the most highly skilled, offensive-minded prospect, but I do think he could be a bottom 6, sizable, good two-way forward who also has a little bit of offensive ability in his bag as well. And then getting down to AJ Spellici, we've seen his offensive numbers kind of take a dip over the last month or two, but again, I don't really think AJ Spellici is ever going to be known for his offensive abilities. It's always going to be about the speed, the size, the athleticism, the motor, the way he can play on both ends of the puck, how he can play with some physicality. The offensive game is just always going to be a little bit of an added boost for him. He's got 32 points, 16 goals, 16 assists in 58 games, but is a huge part of the success that the Windsor Spitfires have had as a team this year. Before I go, I do want to get into an update on the OHL standings as we're down to the final 5, 6, 7 games of the season for all of these teams. Starting out east, who's atop the Eastern Conference OHL standings? It's the Brantford Bulldogs. They have 85 points in 63 games, an absolute juggernaut of a squad. The Barrie Colts are second, 5 points back of Brantford in 62 games. So they do have a game in hand, but Brantford going to be trying to secure the conference down in the home stretch of the season. At number 3 is the Oshawa Generals, who have 82 points. They're actually only 3 points back of Brantford, but have played one more game than Barrie, with 63 on the year. The Kingston Frontenacs are 4th with 80 points, so they're still there right in the hunt with 62 games on the season. The Mississauga Steelheads are 5th with 70 points in 61 games. And then we see Alex Ferrand's Sudbury Wolves in the 6th spot with 65 points in 61 games. All of those teams have already clinched playoff spots, so we'll be seeing Nick Lardis, Merrick Vanacker, and the Brantford Bulldogs in the playoffs. Going to see if they can come away with the Eastern Conference title. And then the Sudbury Wolves with Alex Ferrand will be playing in the OHL postseason as well. Moving out west, the absolutely loaded London Knights are atop the conference standings with 102 points in 61 games. But AJ Spellici, Liam Greentree, and the Windsor Spitfires are at the 2 spot with 87 points in 62 games. Jack Pridham in the Kitchener Rangers, and that just reminded me. I forgot to give you all a Jack Pridham update. That was just some bad prep work by yours truly, but don't worry. I have all these pages bookmarked, and I can pull up Jack Pridham's stats here in a jiffy. He remains an incredible dynamic two-way threat in his first year in the OHL with the Kitchener Rangers. 49 points, 25 goals, and 24 assists in 44 games. Good stuff out of Jack Pridham, as Kitchener currently has the 3rd spot in the Western Conference with 94 points in 63 games. The Saginaw Spirit are in the 4th spot with 75 points in 63 games. And then we see the Erie Otters with Martin Misiak and Ty Henry. They're in the 5 spot with 68 points in 61 games, 7 points ahead of the 6-seeded Flint Firebirds as they have 61 points through 62 games. Windsor, Kitchener, and Erie all have already clinched spots in the OHL playoffs as well. So every Blackhawks prospect in the OHL will be taking part in the postseason. I'll be covering that right here on Locked On Blackhawks. Be on the lookout for the next prospect update I'll be giving as I'll dive into the Blackhawks NCAA prospects. But that's going to close out today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to hit that subscribe button for free right now down below. Jump in the comment section, smash that like button, and go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast. That way you can check out the latest episode if you're on the road to work, during your lunch break, whatever it may be, 100% free as well. Until tomorrow's episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your Tuesdays. I'm going to do the same and enjoy the rest of my birthday. Until next time, have a great rest of your day. I'll catch you on the next episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.